Jon Gruden wants back in the coaching circles, and I understand it. Obviously, he saw his NFL coaching career cut short in a spot where he obviously thinks that it was unfair, and that's his prerogative. But he doesn't view himself with a future in the NFL as a coach. He wants to be a college football coach. And if you want your team to hire Jon Gruden as a college coach, I just have one simple question for you. Why? Why do you want Jon Gruden? He's going to be a popular name in coaching circles that when we start to put lists together of this could be the person, here's the list of people who could replace insert coach who hasn't even been fired yet here, which you're already seeing. I saw today before I saw the Jon Gruden news, the betting odds for who will replace Billy Napier at Florida. Well, Billy Napier has a job. He's still gainfully employed. What do you mean who's going to be the person to replace him? Like, we should do that after he gets fired. But that is not the way that we really operate in 2024. And so when you look at Jon Gruden, could he be the guy that replaces Billy Napier, or Sam Pittman, or Dave Aranda at Baylor, or whoever else you want to throw in the list of these are people who are on the hot seat? Could Jon Gruden be the head coach at Marshall? Why would you want that? First, let's just start from a football perspective. Jon Gruden won a Super Bowl, big time. One of the best defenses to ever be assembled. It was more than 2 decades ago. George W. Bush was the president when Jon Gruden won a Super Bowl. And if you look at his NFL resume as a whole, he's a couple of games over 500. If I were to sit down and ask you, would you want Brian Billick to be the head coach of your college football program? You would say, God, no. And my response would be, well, why? He won a Super Bowl. So did Jon Gruden. He won a Super Bowl 2 decades ago. And you can't take that away from him. But to act as if he was Andy Reid or Bill Belichick is revisionist history at best. That his football teams were, over the course of his entire career, okay. So, he hasn't had a winning season as a head football coach since George W. Bush was president. So what would lead you to believe that, like, oh my gosh, slam dunk hire, could not have done better than Jon Gruden? Now, the devil's advocate of that is like winning the press conference is a big deal in college football when you hire a new coach, right? Like, you need that immediate spike of booster money, NIL money, etc. Jon Gruden would absolutely be a name that you could make a lot of money on, that you could get a lot of cachet out of, that would mean something to recruits potentially, and maybe not even from a coaching perspective, but like, hey, that's the guy who used to be on Monday Night Football. But it undeniably would bring you some NIL money and some booster cash. But if you're a serious college football program, you don't need that name recognition to get you over the hump in the NIL or booster category, right? Like, Colorado didn't hire Deion Sanders because of his football acumen, because he was just an absolute tactician with X's and O's. That didn't happen. Deion Sanders got the job because, like, holy hell, you're Deion Sanders. If you're Florida, if you're Arkansas, do you want to kind of dilute your brand so badly that you're like, please, for the love of God, Jon Gruden, who won a Super Bowl 20 years ago, come save us? He's got minimal coaching experience in the college ranks. And I don't even know that saying minimal is enough to really highlight the fact, like, this guy hasn't really ever done this before. Like, the last college he coached at was Pacific 35 years ago. So why would you want Jon, from a football aspect, why would you want Jon Gruden to be your head coach? Then you take into account the off the field stuff. And whether you think it's fair, unfair, whether you're, whether you think it's fair, unfair, or, if your worst moments in an email were ever released publicly, you probably wouldn't look that great either. And you might be right. I might not look great if the dumbest things I've ever sent in an email were made public. But you're not going to pay me $9.5 million to coach your teenagers either. You're not going to pay me to be the state's highest paid employee in my entire job role, for the most part, is dealing with young, impressionable minorities. And I don't want to, I'm going to make this very short. I don't want to sit here and grandstand about the racist things that Jon Gruden had said, because I don't necessarily have a problem with some of the sexist things he said. Oh, Jon Gruden thinks pretty girls are pretty, more at 10 and 11, like whoop-de-doo. But when you start saying racist stuff, and it's undeniably racist, there is no argument against it. I don't know how, one, you go into the homes of black recruits and say, like, hey, I'm a changed man compared to the several hundred emails I sent that had racist things in them. It's probably just not going to land on, like, really welcoming ears. So, from the off of the field aspect, why do you want Jon Gruden to be your coach? Like, you wouldn't accept those things from your children, your boss, your coworkers, and pretty much anybody in your life. You're not looking at them like, oh man, this is cool. I'm glad, like, I'm conversing with a racist. That's awesome. And if you would, maybe do a little bit of soul searching. But strictly from a football aspect, Jon Gruden should be like a non-starter if you are a serious program. If Buffalo, Kent State says, you know what, hell with it, we'll hire Jon Gruden. Like, that's like Rick Pitino got his 14th chance in college basketball at Iona, right? Like, they don't care necessarily about the repercussions. And there's not a ton of media coverage about Iona basketball, so they didn't have to worry about the pushback, the blowback, whatever. If you are a group of 5 school, if you are a Sunbelt school, MAC school, Mountain West, low-level Conference USA, you can look at, like, we can hire Jon Gruden and we can deal with the pushback, the blowback. There, in this story, by the way, is from Brandon Marcello from CBS Sports, who did a great job, and I'll link to it in the description, of basically, like, hey, he talked to Jon Gruden about what he wants to do with his football life. He wants to be a college coach. And Brandon Marcello talked to athletic directors. Some of them were like, yeah, he's going to get attention. He's probably going to get interviews. And then others were like, he is Chernobyl. You cannot touch Jon Gruden, which means it's somewhere in the middle, right? There are people who say, yeah, I would talk to him. I would bring him in for an interview, have that conversation with him. And no, I absolutely wouldn't do it, which means it's more likely than not that somebody's going to end up interviewing Jon Gruden, at least. But his name is going to be out there, and his name is going to be associated with high-profile jobs. And at the end of the day, the question persists. Why? Why would you want that at your program? Why would you want the headaches, the everything that comes with the distractions, all of that stuff? if your university is going to hire Jon Gruden and it's going to turn into a what in the world are we doing? Why do you take that chance? Why do you deal with that? Why do you put up with that? I don't have the answer to that other than, well, he's going to get us attention. Can you do better than that? Does your program deserve better than people are going to be looking at us? Yeah, for not like I when I worked in radio, I would opine about how awful some of the commercials were. And people would say, yeah, but you remembered them. Yeah, I remembered not to do business with that company because their commercials suck. Any attention is good attention. Any press is good press. Not in 2024. In fact, a lot of press is bad press. Does cancel culture exist? Yeah. Does it suck? Yeah. Do some people deserve to just be canceled? Yeah. Don't know why I pulled out a macho man. Yeah. Does Jon Gruden deserve a second chance? That's not for me to decide because I don't want a college athletic department. But from just a pure football aspect, the idea that like, hey, kids, this guy who won a Super Bowl when you weren't alive is going to lead us to the promised land, even though the last university he coached at no longer has football, and that was 35 years ago. I don't know how that instills upon you this like great excitement of like, holy crap, here comes Jon Gruden, baby. The guy who coached the Las Vegas Raiders to they freaking 8-8. The guy who coached the Oakland Raiders to 4-12 and the Las Vegas Raiders to 8-8. He's going to be your head coach. Okay, cool. There are a lot better options out there than Jon Gruden. And yet I imagine at some point here in the next 4 months, we might be talking about, holy hell, Jon Gruden got hired at insert university here. And we'll have that discussion again. But I just think ultimately why you want to be in the Jon Gruden business. That's just me. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we are pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.